Hello and welcome to the Ken McElroy Show. I'm your host, Danille, here with Ken.
Hey guys, what's going on?
I'm trying to sign into YouTube, but it's causing me some problems right now.
Oh, technology.
I know, right?
So we had a good weekend. That was fun. I was in LA
Yeah, what were you doing over there?
speaking. I spoke to 600 doctors in LA at a great conference, actually. It was a lot of really smart people there. The doctors are working their butts off. And one of the interesting charts that he put up, which I thought was lifespan of like different kinds of doctors. It was a physician conference, physicians in entrepreneurship, and the ER doc had a lifespan of like 74 years old or something.
Like it was...
It's like the lowest. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So they had all these different kinds of doctors.
Well, it's probably stressful.
It's something you don't really think about. Obviously, it's a physician conference, so these are the things they talk about. I thought that was very eye-opening.
Dr. Nicole and Dr. Rada always say that stress, and
Yeah,
I would imagine being an ER doctor stressful.
Yeah, I guess. You think doctors, I don't know, you just think they're in the system and that they would live a long life, but it was pretty eye-opening. I took a screenshot of it, and I sent it to a couple friends of mine that are doctors. So,
of course you did.
Yeah, of course.
Why wouldn't you?
But that's a low number, like
Yeah.
74 as an ER doc.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. Anyway, so it was fun. I had a good time. These really, really good group of folks.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, today we have a good topic. We're going to talk about how the U.S. made affordable housing illegal. But before we do that, we are going to jump into our Twitter question of the week. Can you ask, what's the most important aspect to consider when investing in real estate and why? And Jack said, start with the end in mind. Make sure you define the possible exit strategies and what time horizon you're looking at. It'll take the emotion out of the deal.
Yeah, what a lot of people might not realize is when we buy a property, I have a plan for the whole thing, like beginning to end. And that might be to sell, it might not be to sell, but either way, there's a whole plan. We don't just invest in it and then hope and then kind of bump along and have a loose strategy. It's fully discussed and put into a business plan. Now, the business plan isn't always, spot on either, but at least you've thought through it, and so I agree with that. You really have to have the end in mind.
Well, I like how he said to keep the emotion out of the deal, because I think some of us smaller investors and even bigger investors sometimes we get emotional about things because we really love this house.
Well, she says we
really love this
her.
area.
It's not me. Like her.
No, I said us smaller investors.
You said we.
Well, I was talking about us in a group.
I know.
But anyway, so you really do have to take the emotion. I'm getting much better at that than I was at the beginning, because just because you love something, if the numbers don't work, they just don't work.
It's a fact. It is tough to compartmentalize that and stick it in a box and say it's math.
Yeah.
Right?
Correct.
But it is the way to look at it.
So our next comment comes from Wade. He said, what could I reasonably expect my resale value to be after improvements? I want to know what capital I can pull back out for the next one. So Wade's obviously a flipper. So he likes to flip homes.
Yep.
But if you're a flipper, then that is what you need to consider. It comes down to that and interest rates.
Well, the resale value is set by the market, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. The big thing to consider there is interest rates.
Yeah.
Who's that end buyer? If you're flipping and you're doing a value add, which looks like you are, that's awesome. Are they going to be able to buy it? You're starting to see more and more articles about pricing tick down and listings go up, but it's still very, very low. The listings are, I think, last time we had Jason on last week, he was talking about listings are at like 40-50% of their historical average, so still very low.
I think even though the Fed didn't change rates, did I hear it right that they still increased mortgage rates a little bit?
Yeah, the Treasury went up, so It's interesting, but yep. The cost of mortgages are high. I was looking at it was at the 10-year Treasury, I think, was like a 10-year high, something like that, right? So yeah.
Well, what was interesting, I only closed on my mortgage at the end of June and I got 6.9. And I was reading now the mortgages typically the average is like 8.2 or something like that, which is a lot.
Yeah, I'm hearing construction interest is like 9, 10.
Wow.
Like, think about that. Like, so you.
Well, that's why there's no building.
Yeah. Well, building stopped a while ago when it started ticking up to 5, 6, 7, and now it's gone even further. So that's gonna create more problems for affordability, which is a great topic for today.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Jerry, go ahead. Kevin says financing. Without the right terms, nothing else matters.
Yeah.
A deal could have everything else right, be perfect, and the wrong financing will blow it up.
So that just happened to us.
Yeah, why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, we were in escrow on a property, and we relied on the broker to, lay out what they thought the financing was going to be and all that stuff, and they relied on information from the seller and the property management company. And what happened was there were problems inside of the rent roll, and there were problems inside of the way they showed things, classified things, and there were concessions and things like that. So that's not a deal killer by any means. But when we went to the lender, they said, whoa, like, we're going to need more reserves. This property's not running the way we thought it was going to be. And they, and then of course the lending terms start to change. And so all of a sudden we had to put down more equity than we thought we were going to have to do based on that stuff. So the financing is a key point. And lenders they're coming up with more and more tougher guidelines, and underwriting is harder, and they're putting all kinds of reserves in there, and it's gonna be a rough road here in the next year or two. Financing is going to be the biggest topic.
Yeah, the biggest hurdle. So today I want to talk about how the U.S. made affordable housing illegal. So essentially, when we talk to people that predominantly are not in the real estate space, they don't understand why all the buildings being built are, A buildings. They're super nice. Why they aren't building more, C buildings. They don't understand why they're not building small single family homes. They're not understanding why we can't do more tiny home communities, mobile home communities, things that people can actually afford. And the truth is because we have certain regulations, it makes affordable housing very hard to build.
Well, I will tell you this. In a perfect entrepreneur type of a world, or call it a free market, builders would build tiny homes. The struggle for affordability is it's a concern because the cities and the counties and the states won't allow it based on the regulations that they have.
Right.
But if it was a true free market, people would build affordable.
Right.
If they could.
Because there's a big need for it.
Huge. It's huge. You imagine if a home builder could, right. And there's so many things that I would call their hands are tied, Mm-hmm. There's so many things that a developer and contractor have to do that cost money. And what people don't realize is that, just like you wouldn't do in any business, if the price of the roof goes up, or the price of the flooring or the appliances or whatever, that just gets passed through to the consumer. That's exactly how it all rolls downhill. So as rates go up and things become financed, or in this particular case, we're talking about zoning. If I can build one home on an acre, it's going to cost the purchase or the price of that home to construct it plus the acre. Or if I could put two there, it would be the price of the land plus two. So again, you would half the cost of the land, which would save the consumer.
Yeah, so let's take a step back really quick. So let's look at supply. I think part of our affordable housing problem right now, before we get into zoning, is the supply and demand side, right?
Yeah.
So you have to say, why is supply so limited? And a lot of that has to go back all the way to 2008 and the housing crash there, right? So this last decade, from 2010 to 2019, there's less homes that were built since the 1960s.
Yep.
When we had a much smaller
I don't think people
population.
realize that is actually the core problem.
Mm-hmm.
It's if you have to look in the rearview mirror, but there's a myriad of issues of why that happened.
Right.
You know, you have to, like, when '08 exploded, and I was in the middle of this, the banks were taking back homes.
Mm-hmm.
So just put yourself in their position. If you lent out a bunch of money to a bunch of people in the form of home loans, and you're getting it all back, the last thing that you're really doing is lending, right? Like you are, but it's just really what you're trying to do is manage the inbound.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's supposed to be outbound, right?
Right.
So, you know, you have to kind of go through that period first. There was a period of pain with the banks. I know nobody cares about that, but the fact is that's what stopped the lending for new stuff. At the same time, we had, you know, the population is growing. So this is just a math problem. You know, when you have a amount of population growing through, by the way, all kinds of, it's really cool if you actually look at, you can track births and deaths. So it's really, really quite neat. Like you can go back and see like how many people are actually going to turn 21 this year, or how many people are going to turn 45 this year. Now, obviously, it's not completely perfect, but it's pretty darn close. So you know when they were born. What you don't know is if they've passed away or let's say they've moved or whatever. Well, I guess you do know when they moved. But the point is, and then you've got immigration, which is a big topic. But let's don't forget, folks, that's a big number when it comes to services, housing, that kind of stuff. Even more so now. So you have all these factors that contribute to demand, and that's been progressively moving up.
Mm-hmm.
So during that time from 08, 9, 10, there were still kids going to college. There were still kids moving out after college. Still kids needing rentals and buying homes and all those kinds of things. All during that period of time, we weren't adding any supply. And that really, I wouldn't say was as much of a government problem as much as the banks were still reeling from all the toxic debt that they had taken from 08, 9, 10.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, in the homes that were built, only 7% were starter homes.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you go back to the 80s, it used to be 40-50% are starter homes. Now you're looking at 7% starter homes.
That's a heck of a statistic.
Mm-hmm.
You think about that. What is it? I think a starter home has got to be somewhere between $300,000 and $400,000 now, right? That's expensive.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Well, and it just depends where you're at too. I mean, in Scottsdale, I think it's like $600,000.
If you can find anything for $6,000,
anything,
yeah. But you start to move around. I mean, the Midwest is less, of course,
mm-hmm.
but the think about how much money that is, and then you throw a 7 or 8% interest rate on there. You know, this is why I keep saying to people, there's going to be you look and they're talking about, rents are going down and all that kind of stuff. And it might be the case in some particular areas, but you just follow the momentum. If people can't buy houses, they're going to rent, period. And so, I think that the other real problem is that we kind of stopped building a year ago, maybe a year, let's say plus ago. So everything that's under construction right now was started a year to 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. Everybody needs to know that. Like those are projects that were started when rates were low and hopefully the construction prices were low. All these projects are going to be finished out. And I'm generalizing, of course, but there's going to be a big problem in 2025, 2026, guys. Big. Because there's no new construction coming.
Right. Well, especially with these rates, and then, so we're going to talk about some of the zoning that's happening there that just is in place as well. So let's get into the zoning. So you have exclusionary zoning, right? That's a big problem. So do you want to explain what that is?
Well, so the way I think you got to back up from it. Every city has a master plan of how it's laid out. So it's just like how you lay out your house. You got a bedroom here and a kitchen here and a living room here. It's the same thing with a city. You've got industrial over here. You got office over here. You got multifamily over here. You got single family over here. And they're pretty rigid around the way things are supposed to be, and they're trying to categorize them and put them in. There are cities like, I'll pick on Houston. Houston doesn't look like it has any zoning. So, you're driving by, you got a warehouse and you got an office building, you got a home, you got all this stuff all over the place. So there is a method to the madness. It's nothing wrong with the way zoning is set up. These master plans, they do get changed from time to time. And you'll find that a lot of times that can be a big case. But what you find is it's not only government. Like if stuff could be zoned, let's say multifamily, and the neighbors next to them might not want it.
Right.
So that turns into a huge.
Well, you deal with that a lot with MC,
time.
right?
All the time.
I know that just happened in our community where, it's zoned multifamily and you go to build multifamily, but then the board votes it down and says, no, we only want single family.
Yeah. And if you're a single family homeowner, you don't want to see in a 2-story apartment building next door. Mm-hmm. So you're going to fight it, and so, so this is an age-old problem, right? And so the city, for them to change zoning, that's harder, obviously, than something that's zoned. But even something that's zoned is not a slam dunk,
Right, because you have that NIMBY.
Correct. NIMBY is not in my backyard.
Right.
So that's what NIMBY means. And so you have that going on as well. And then now you sprinkle in the fact that the cost to build and the interest rate to build again, makes its way to the consumer. So all of that stuff. Right.
And we'll get into that here in a second. And also another issue that cities have, or another, regulation that they have, is height restrictions.
Yeah. So that's another one. So, you take a look at any city anywhere, you'll see that everything's usually like 2 stories. And then sometimes on certain corners it might be more, but even that has a height restriction. So I always look at this because I think it's fascinating, and then when the city allows that extra floor, what it does, it actually creates affordability.
Right. Because that's a whole additional
correct. Right.
Of homes.
Yeah. So I'll just break it down for you. I think it was LA. It was obviously, it's super. I was just there this weekend. It's expensive there. And so what they did is I think it was LA County, if I'm not mistaken, they decided instead of 1 house per lot, you could do 2 houses per lot. So same price.
They loosened up their exclusionary zoning.
Yes, correct. So that's relaxing the zoning so that you can put more units on one piece of land. And that's what everybody's fighting. They don't want a skyscraper. Like, you don't want a skyscraper next door to your house,
mm-hmm.
So they'll have, let's say, a 22-foot height restriction or something. And to punch through that is hard.
Right.
To go to, say, 36 feet or, maybe that extra story, it makes it even worse. You got a 2-story. So we've had to do deals where we've had to do single family on the perimeter of the whole property. So imagine single family inside of our multifamily. Or single level, I should say. Single level units with garages. Actually, it was a great project. And then in the middle, we did 2 and 3 story. So that was the compromise with the neighbors. So what it did do, though, if you think about it, it probably took 30 or 40 units out of that project. That's the lesson here. And what was really needed is supply.
Right.
So developers are getting squeezed by what we call it density. And, you want to, obviously a developer is going to put as much as the city allows. It's not, the developer actually is not the person in the driver's seat to decide how many units or how many homes go on a property.
Well, they would love more the better, really.
Yeah, they would. And they would make them more affordable, and they would make them smaller if they could and all that stuff. But we can't.
Right.
I don't know if people really completely understand that. It's very rare that you can just go build, what you want to build.
Absolutely. And then another one is another stipulation is parking requirements.
Yeah, that's another
so
one.
I was looking, the city of Phoenix requires 1.5 parking spaces for each 1 to 2 bedroom unit of multifamily.
Right. And then it's more for 3. It's usually two parking for a 3 bedroom. So yes, so parking regulations can be another one. And while that doesn't seem like much, if you have a 200 unit property, that could be 300 spaces. And so all of a sudden it pushes the parking lots all the way around the property. And that's why you typically see perimeter parking with the properties in the center. And some cities are relaxing that. Again, if you relax that, then you all of a sudden have more units, which of course creates affordability.
But it also could create a parking issue.
It definitely has created parking issues. So you would never, but they think about it, people figure it out. Like, just think about a downtown. Like, so we landed in LA on Saturday morning, and we rented a car. Then we drove right, into downtown LA. Of course, no parking, right? Tons of residential there, though. What was the hardest part? Finding parking. So yes, that's a consideration, but people make those decisions. And there's a score in those properties called walkability. So they take a look at the walkability score. The walkability means, how far is it for me to walk to Whole Foods or the nearest grocery store, or whatever, just the conveniences, right? And the light rail and all that kind of stuff. So you got to take a look at the whole picture. There are properties that are what we call infill that, are on light rail. And that's a big deal. Like a developer like ourselves would definitely want to build along a light rail because, like in Denver, you can if you build along the light rail or where there's spur, where there's stop, so you can commute to that spot, get on the light rail, and then shoot into town. Or you can live downtown and use the light rail to move around. That's certainly how Portland was set up as well. So you can start to compromise those parking requirements in some of those what we call infill downtown, primarily downtown locations.
Yeah, absolutely. And not everyone has cars anymore either. I mean, more and more people are starting to rely on Uber and public transportation.
Yeah, that's been a good thing. And the big thing now for parking is the electric. So we're in the process of retrofitting our properties with electric car chargers and stuff like that. And also, that's why they do the carpool lane and the commutes and all that kind of stuff. So, this is a real thing. But if you can lower the parking restrictions, increase the density, you're going to have more affordability, period.
And I want to bring up, too, the minimum lot sizes, because I think a lot of people are like, why don't they build tiny home communities? Why don't we build smaller homes? And, somebody could easily live in a 1,000 square foot home.
We would if we could.
But the starter home, so, Phoenix is a 6,600 square foot lot. Scottsdale, 7,000 square foot lot. Starter homes are usually only 1,400 to 1,500 feet. So you could really fit 2 to 3 homes on a lot, like you were saying at the beginning, but you can't because you have to have a certain lot size. Yeah. And this is maybe what they loosened in California that you were speaking of.
They did, yeah. And this is why mobile home parks are such a big deal right now. There's a lot of people, cranking those out because you could buy those back in the day for $50,000, $60,000 per home. or per lot, I should say, because the actual mobile home is actually owned by the typically the person that owns the mobile home. But you could buy these mobile homes, charge a lot fee, and then people would bring their mobile home and they would give you a rental. But I have friends that do this, and they also actually build their own. So so you have a combination of people that are owned and people that are owned by the park themselves. But it's starting to become less affordable. Yeah, I mean, this RV trip that you and I did this summer, I mean, that was one of the primary reasons, right? When we went to Jackson Hole, as an example. I've got a friend that has 3 in Montana near Flathead Lake. He said they're doing $2,000-3,000 a month in fees on these little RVs lots. By the way, there's no structure. It's just like a little piece of a driveway.
Yeah.
I mean, so this is starting to be a big deal. You're starting to see people rent, or they're looking for tiny home communities. They're looking for mobile homes, and they're actually buying, as we saw, these 10, 15-year-old RVs and living in some of these RV parks around the country. These RV parks are full.
Yeah, they're really full.
Yeah. Affordability is a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Rents are definitely getting expensive.
People are figuring it out. Yeah, and at least in an RV, you got a bathroom and you got a little kitchen and all that kind of stuff. But when we went to some of these parks, we were doing our due diligence. There were people down in, there were sections where these did not move, right?
Right. Yeah.
There were areas where they just lived. We're talking about 50, 100 people in these parks. And then 50 feet away, you'd have, $200,000-300,000 motor homes, and what I mean. So it's crazy. But affordability is a problem, and it's too bad these tiny homes that aren't pushed more by some of these administrations, because people need it.
Absolutely. And if you guys could hit the like button, it would really help us out. Helps out our channel. Would love that. Also, I wanted to bring up the fact that you have a happy hour with Clay next Monday for our Inner Circle members.
You guys are going to love this one. He used to work, he studied under Janet Yellen, so at Berkeley. And he is in finance, and we're going to talk to him about interest rates and all this stuff. It's going to be fun.
Absolutely. So just go to kenmccord.com/join now to sign up for the Inner Circle. Anyways, and then the last thing I want to bring up here is additional dwelling units. So ADUs. So California also made it easier for people to have additional dwelling units.
Smart.
And people are asking about this on the channel, but there's a lot of places that won't.
Yeah, I hope that this gets passed. Thatch, our friend Thatch, he does this a lot up in Seattle area. California certainly does this. Basically, this is taking, just think of a long, narrow lot, and the back is, let's say, parking. They're allowing an ADU in the back. Mm-hmm. So essentially putting a second home on that same lot. This is actually a sneaky way to really grow your income, guys. So if you can find a municipality and a need where where there's high occupancy and almost no vacancy, and a home on the lot that allows a second, this is a great strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jerome said that in Atlanta, northern Atlanta, they're having a really big problem because everything's on the higher luxury end, and they've turned a vacant grocery store into a pay and stay.
Ooh.
So, yeah, so affordability is really, really an issue.
Yeah. When we were in Franklin, by the way, Tennessee, this is an affluent area that we were in. The houses, actually Airbnb that we were in was listed. It was like $1.5 million or something.
$2 million for both.
Okay.
Because they had an ADU, which was essentially a whole other home.
And this is the thing. So the beautiful brand new home on the front, you drive down the same driveway to the back, and almost an identical home in the back. Mm-hmm. And as you walk down this street, the street was full of these, and you could tell people were starting to buy these. and add a second home in the back. And if you just want to get into the real estate game and you want to buy a primary residence and you want to build something in the back and you travel and you have somebody to kind of watch your place and they can rent the one in the back, it's not a bad strategy for a little bit of cash flow.
Absolutely. And then also with California, with the additional dwelling units, they legalize them, but then with these interest rates, people have not really been taking advantage because it's just too expensive still to do the construction.
Yeah.
So
there's also size limitations on the ADUs in a lot of areas. I think in Scottsdale it's 1,000 square feet.
Okay.
That certainly wasn't the case in Franklin because that home behind us was
huge,
easily 3,000 or plus.
Right. Absolutely. So I want to jump into our inner circle questions. Our first one comes from Andre. They're asking, if you have two tenants living in your house who are not married, is it okay to have both names on one renter's insurance policy?
Oh, I don't know. I wish I knew. That's an insurance question. I don't think. I think the way we do our renter's insurance is it's in the name of the person that rents on the lease. But I think if there's multiple, we have them each get their own. I believe that's how we do it. But the renter's insurance, either way, you can't. Well, let's put it this way. For a little bit of money, it's better to have both on there. And I think, can't you do an additional insured as well?
Yeah, like I'm additionally insured on all the policies. To be honest, I just have every building just get one. Because for me, the way I look at it is it can all technically be their stuff. You know what I mean? Like who's to say who's Joey's stuff versus Sandra's stuff? And for me, what I'm most concerned about is, damages and not having to replace their stuff. So if it's going to cover that, I don't really care who has it.
Yeah. I wish I could tell you. I just don't know. Maybe somebody here, maybe one of our listeners could help me with that. I just don't. And now we're getting into who's insurance a little bit, but it's a great question.
But you do want to be, additionally insured on the insurance because then you're covered to an extent. And then also, if they cancel it.
Yeah.
If they cancel it, it sends you a notice.
Yep.
Gianna's asking, who is normally in charge of bug spraying, the landlord or the tenant?
So I would almost always take it on as a landlord in charge of. Now, that would be because you want to make sure you cut the best deal. Whenever you put anything into tenants' hands, it's going to be less or not done. So I just think you just want to keep control of that, and then what you do is you just so let's say your rent's $1,500, just put bug spray $30 a month. Just make it so now it's $1,300 or $1,530 or whatever it is. That's how I would do it. But I would not pass it over. We've run into this problem on landscaping as an example. Tenants are, they're gonna keep it up the way they want to keep it up, and you as a landlord probably are not going to want that to happen. So my suggestion is that you control everything, landscaping, pest control, everything, and the cadence of all of it, and then you pass that back through. To the tenant. The one thing, obviously, you want the tenant to have is their own individual electric and water and sewer and all that stuff. So utilities would transfer over. But even then, you could technically do what we call RUBS, or resident utility billing system. You could actually bulk all that up and say your utilities are $100 a month and you just pay me. Yeah. You could do that. You could take every single expense. I would not lump it into rent because now it just shows that the rent for that place is more. You want to categorize it and let them see what it's for. Yeah,
I do it differently at each one of my properties. Typically, the way that I do it is sometimes the HOA takes care of it. Even on the inside, I have a building where they even take care of the inside of the unit. So there I don't have to worry about it at all. On the single families, I strike a deal, they pay for half. So I have some buildings that don't really need bug spray. They don't really have bugs. And I have other ones that they do. And then we split the cost for any kind of bug treatment. And that just makes them invested into the bug spray.
Yeah.
All right. Byron says, can I make tenants responsible for water damage after they left a tub running and extensive damage happened to my property?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. This should fall into the insurance category, certainly the resident insurance category, which was an earlier question. But of course, water damage is.
But this is why they get the renter's insurance.
That's right.
I mean, this exact situation. So if you're trying to make your tenants responsible for $15,000 in damage, good luck getting that from them. You know what I mean? But that is why they have insurance. You're also on the insurance, so that way you know what their insurance is. You call, you handle it, and you get it covered.
Yeah. By the way, guys, you might not know, but we have 10,000 tenants. It's mandatory that they all get renter's insurance. Period. Mm-hmm. It's just the way it is. It's a way for you not to have to turn in an insurance claim against your own personal policy. That's the whole point. You don't want your insurance to go up. You want it fixed, and you don't want your insurance to go up. So that's what we do on every single one. And you do that, right? You make them get
they have to get the renter's policy from. Yeah. And you guys, it's like $100 a year, $120 a year. We're not talking about a lot of money for them. And I always tell them, this protects your stuff, because what I don't want is a flood and them to say, well, you owe me for my, $2,000 couch and all my stuff and my computer. It's just like, call your insurance. You just handle that with your insurance.
Well, I've had this problem. We had most of the time the tub overflows and then it leaks to the unit below. I mean, this is a very common, so then it creates most of the problems actually created below, in the tenant below. And so what happened is we had drywall damage, we had paint damage, and then we had art, we had clothes, we had bedding, we had all the stuff in the unit below. So, so the tenant above created the problems for the tenant below. And the landlord has to sort all this out, of course, because the tenant above and the tenant below might not know each other. And even if they did, they're not going to agree. So that's where this renter's insurance stuff kicks in. It's really important.
Right.
Because of it's the stuff that was damaged. That's actually where the problem lies. It ruined a bed, or ruined my clothes. It ruined a dresser that was wood. Mm-hmm. There's so many things that can happen. So same thing with a fire, though. It's the exact same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Ruben from the Inner Circle is asking, where I live in Charleston, South Carolina, housing prices have soared and they keep rising. Cash flow at these prices doesn't work. Should I look at other towns in my state?
Oh, you were just there.
Oh, I love Charleston.
Yeah, so why don't you talk about this?
Well, I think in South Carolina, you have to be careful, right? Because there's a lot of small towns in South Carolina. And unless you really understand a small town market, it is going to definitely be cheaper. But your vacancy, right? Your vacancy rate, I don't know what that would be. So, Charleston is a very popular town, and I'd say just keep looking, try to find off-market deals, try to find deals that maybe you could put an ADU on, or that you could, rent differently in order to make the numbers work. But right now it's just hard to find stuff that cash flows anywhere. But you really do need to be careful investing in smaller towns you are not familiar with.
But I will tell you, it's a great question, and thank you for having this one. What happens a lot of times is you'll watch this. Again, let's just talk about zoning, since that's kind of our topic today. Once your prices start getting really high for rent and for homes, everybody starts looking for alternatives, right? So if you're an employer and you can't hire, you look to maybe even relocate your business. If you're an employee and you can't afford to live downtown, you look at a commute. So all this stuff starts to happen when you start to find affordable problems. And one thing that can solve this, of course, is relaxed zoning, as is one example, or impact fees, which are the cost that it takes to, build on something, and that's the plug into the water, sewer, all that kind of stuff. But what we found is like in a little town like Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, which is an area that we go to every summer for 15 years now, that you can't live there and work. So you have to now commute 15, 20, 30 minutes. Like people live in Spokane, believe it or not, and commute to Coeur d'Alene for work. So that's not good. And so what happens, and the whole point of this is, you can find that these little pockets that are affordable do start to open up when prices start to go up and rents are up. So sometimes those little small towns can be little sneaker towns. You can find a little niche in there if it's not very far. And if you find some of those patterns, you'll start to see this, I believe. Just like all small towns that become unaffordable.
Yeah, you just have to be very
You
familiar.
do. You have to see and you have to watch the patterns, but it does happen.
Yeah. So Chad from the Inner Circle is asking, on a recent YouTube video, you mentioned that you and Ross are selling off assets with negative cash flow. How far is the look back to determine if it's negative?
Yeah, so
12 months, 3 years, 5 years, etc.
Yeah. So the thought here is, if you have something that you have equity in, let's say, and your mortgage and your expenses cannot cover your rent, that's negative.
Mm-hmm.
So in that case, you could move your equity to something that's cash positive. That's all. So it's just a cash management.
But how far back?
How far back do you go?
Yeah, like say something's negative now, but it wasn't negative last year. Like, do you bail on that, or do you?
Well, you have to look at why. So if rents went down, then that's one issue. If expenses are up, that's another issue. So you can't predict everything that's going to happen moving forward. The thing is, a lot of people are banking on rates to go down, let's say. I don't see that, but at least through 2024. But so if you can hold it through 2024, the question is are you going to lose equity too? So this is just about how long do you want to feed it?
Right.
I believe that all property should cash flow, and that you should focus on cash flow at all times. So if you were cash flowing and now it's not, there could be a number of reasons. You just have to, each one, it's not it doesn't just always fit into a perfect box, right? Each one you have to look at independently.
Like, is it going to get better, or is this going to get worse?
Correct. Right. And you might not be, but you got to also be objective and non-biased, which is hard for people because I don't think that expenses are going to go down in the next 5 years. So that's one thing. I don't think that interest rates are going to go down until, probably a year plus. Now, if they do go down, is it meaningful? Quarter point, half a point here or there, when they're already at 7, 8, 9, let's say. Is that really that meaningful? Not really. So that's what I mean by significantly. So I don't think that we're going to see the rates that we saw for a long time. Could be several years. And so looking at all that, and but the one thing I do think that we're going to see rent growth, as we kind of talked about earlier, because of lack of supply. We have high demand, low supply.
So I want to then jump into Gabe's question, and I think this is a good one. He says, Ken, I'm a new Inner Circle member, and I support your work. I've grown a single-family rental portfolio over the last decade in San Antonio. The rates in these are locked between 4 and 5.5% 30-year mortgages. Although this has been a healthy rental market, I find that the rents are not keeping up with the increasing maintenance, taxes, and insurance cost. Some are now low to negative monthly cash flow after management expenses. If selling, the profit on some of these won't net much. What would you suggest is the next move?
So it's exactly what I just explained. Yeah, you're right, Gabe. It's maintenance costs are up, taxes are up. We've been talking about this. Inflation's hitting the landlord hard, right? And you can only move rent so much.
Mm-hmm.
That's true. So if you're getting tight, those are pretty good mortgages. You probably should really dig into there. You can dig into better expense control, perhaps. That's one of the things we're focusing on next year is our R&M, our repairs and maintenance. The other thing is you might want to go out and look to see where you are on the price side. If you believe that rents are going to go up in the next several years, I believe they are. I don't know about where you are, but then it might be worth a hold because of that mortgage. The other thing I would look at is when does that mortgage mature? So if it matures in 2 to 3 years, let's say, sounds like you've been doing this a while, you might want to look at a potential exit. Because again, if you're going to start, you don't want to feed these things. That's the whole issue.
Right. You're not doing it to spend money.
Right. And if you're thin already, that's a little concerning. Mm-hmm. That you're thin already. In other words, it's not really worth much more than the mortgage. I'd be a little concerned moving forward. That'd be one to watch and maybe one to exit from, potentially. Yep. There's a lot of factors.
So Tig is saying, if you're in an investment that is cash calling and the GP won't answer any of my emails, won't answer any emails to the original LP, what are my options?
Yeah, you have to go straight to the operating agreement. Take a look at whatever it says in there. My guess is that this is a thing right now. So it's too bad. I'm sorry you're going through that, but there are some. You can get the LPs together. That's one thing. You can unify if you know who they are. Also, just dig into the operating agreement itself. It should have some stuff in there. And here's the thing: like regardless if you cash call or don't cash call, there are some provisions in there on what that means. And I guarantee you the GP knows, and they knew that before they went out for the cash call. So you should really understand that. If you decide not to send the money in, then you just need to know what the consequences of that is. So does that mean you get diluted? Does that mean you're behind some other money? Just to be blunt, cap rates and interest rates have created value erosion. Values are down 20 to 30%, in some cases even more. So what does that mean? That means that if you put down, or this partnership put down 30%, it could be that that's gone right now. Now, it doesn't mean that it's a bad asset, though. Truly, it does not mean that. There might be some equity in there still. There might be, they just might have some temporary cash problems. But, just go back to your operating agreement and then there has to be a formalized process for the LP. And this would all be part of your PPM and your operating agreement of the actual partnership.
Absolutely. Make sure for those of you listening that you hit the like button. We love that, and it helps us out. All right. So Darren is asking, would you consider buying an office building if it was priced correctly and partially full, or are you that skeptical on office?
No, I like office. I just sold one. I just sold a building, an office building. And it was 100% full. So I like office. Now, you got to take a look at what does a vacant office building do for you. Psychologically, what are the rents? Are they competitive and all that kind of stuff? But I don't, I love real estate. So if I can make a deal in real estate, if you could fill up that property, what we found in our little project, and it's 30,000 square feet, the one that we just sold, there were a number of tenants that were at the 2,000 to 3,000 foot range, and that seemed to be a heck of a spot. I think, all the headlines are these big companies, right? Mm-hmm. But there's still a bunch of people out there that need office. And so, the whole office industry is still healthy in many, many, many ways. And so we were 100% occupied. And who did we have in there? We had insurance agents, we had CPAs, we had little real estate companies, we had title companies, and and we had actually a lender in there too. So, and they were all taking 1,500 to 5,000 square feet, and it was awesome. I think we had like 12 or 15 different tenants. There's a need, and so you got to take a look at that and then just put the math together. So I don't know the area you're in. Mine was in Scottsdale. Scottsdale's still kind of booming. There's a lot of people moving here, and they're opening. A lot of people just want a small little office to work out of and drive to every day and not be at their house. So there's still a fair amount of demand here, but it just depends on the kind of building.
Absolutely. I wanted to point out, Andy had a good idea for Gabe. And just to remind you guys, Gabe is the one that was not cash flowing that much on his single families. He said you could do rent to own in San Antonio, and put maintenance on them. And you charge a little more for rent as you're giving them an opportunity.
There you go. That's the pro tip of the day.
Yeah,
nice.
That's pretty good.
Good job.
So if you're going to sell them.
Who said that?
Andy.
Nice job, Andy. Thank you.
So Florine has a question. She said, the multifamily syndication that I'm in is having a capital call. We have increased occupancy to 85%, but that is still low. How can I better figure out if the GPs can keep the property alive until 25?
Whew. Well, first of all, 85% occupancy is not good. That's low. That's at least 10% low. Mm-hmm. So that, number one, has to be fixed, and that could solve everything. And so I think the focus probably should be on occupancy. I think our whole portfolio is 94, 95% occupied right now, my whole company. Now, I have a lease up, and of course, that's not. But, generally, those are pretty high occupancy. Those are pretty high vacancy numbers. So that would be the first thing. It doesn't necessarily mean that the property is bad. But the operations might not be great. There are things that you can do, though. You can go check to see. You can stop into the property or you can have friends stop into the property. You can see where the rents are as compared to market. And there should be financials. I mean, we put financials up on our portal for our investors, and so you should be able to monitor all this. We haven't even gotten into expenses. But how do you see whether the property's worth? The only way to really do it is to have what currently either an appraisal, of course, which is expensive, but then the brokers are doing a lot of this work. That's called BOVs, or brokers' opinions of value. My guess is that there's already been brokers hovering around this, and if they're doing a cash call. So there's probably an opinion of value here. Most GPs aren't going to actually try to get cash to keep a property unless there's value. So my guess is, again, I don't know to be true, but there probably is value in the property. Or maybe there isn't, and they're just trying to keep it alive with more cash for operations. That's another topic. But the low-hanging fruit for that one is just basic management. It's just get your occupancy up.
Well, and she said they did just hire a new management company, which is who brought it to 85%.
Yeah.
So it was below 85% prior.
So in my talk this weekend to all these doctors, that's what I said. So the next wave for the next 14 months, you're going to see a lot of fired management companies. So this is the period of time where the GPs start firing companies and replacing them with new companies, and it gives them a little bit of window. And it's also a good narrative. We just fired a company, and we got a new company, and things are going to be good. So So you're going to watch, there's going to be a management company churn here in the next, all through the next year.
Well, that's what you always said. You didn't like owning a management company because
Hard,
you're either
man.
fired because you're not doing a good job, or you're fired because you did a good job and it got sold and they want a different management
I remember,
company.
this is what going way back, but I just remember this story because I have PTSD from it. We took over a building, brand new, by the way, brand new property, highly financed. The break even. Okay, so let me walk you through what the break even. The break even is the mortgage plus the expenses. Okay, that's obviously your total expense cash out. And then your income, of course, that's you got to figure out, like, if you have 100% of your income, what's your break even? So your break even should be in the 60s, 70s, let's say, your break even. So in other words, your occupancy can dip down to 70%, 65% in order to break even. That's cover all your expenses and all your debt. The break even on this property that I took over as a manager, guess what it was? 103%. We had to at a 100% occupancy, we were still 3% negative. That was because expenses plus debt. So break even's an interesting thing to watch. And
what's the ideal properties break even?
yeah, it's in the 60s, I would say.
Oh, wow. So they were
70s.
way off. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And what happens is, now you can't look at loan to value and calculate that. You look at your loan payment, and then you add on your insurance and taxes and all your operating expenses, and then you just take a look at what the building at 100% could collect. That's it. So let's say there's 10 units at $1,000 each. That's $10,000. Your expenses should be all in with debt and everything should be around the, say, 60 plus, high 60% range. Okay. And then that gives you enough buffer for vacancy and all that.
But
kind
as
of stuff.
the rates go up, obviously that's going to change.
Well,
right?
if they're variable,
mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so that's kind of the point. So anyway, I guess I was on a management rant.
No,
there.
I think it was interesting.
So the management, but the thing is the management company, you don't always know what you're up against.
Right.
So when you take over a building, you don't know. Sometimes you got to unpack. I remember one building, and I got, it was a small building. We had to evict like 50 or 60 people, and in order to stabilize it. Well, that takes a while, and if you live in California, it could take a long while, And then and there was one property we bought from Bank of America. It was 50% vacant. We bought it from a bank. And there was 100 more people that were paying. So, so what happens is it's not just switching out a management company, because the new management company has to go in and clean up. Okay. So the first thing I always do whenever I did this years ago is I would document and analyze everything that has to happen in the first 30, 60, 90 days. Say, your negative cash flow, you got to evict these people, we're behind on rent, we're behind on paying vendors, whatever it is. There's usually a myriad of things. Deferred maintenance, all that kind of stuff. You put it all in writing, send it to the owner, and what do? They send a letter to their LPs and say, we hired a new management company. So, it's just and then what'll happen though, the problem is unwinding mistakes from the prior. Occupancy gets worse, cash flow gets worse, because your numbers go down. Like, you have to clean out the people that aren't paying and put them in with the people that are. So that's how it works.
Yep, absolutely. Well, thank you guys for watching today. Make sure you check out the happy hour next Monday with Clay Akawinzi, and that will be at kenmcrory.com/join now. Steve's going to put that in the text, and we will see you guys next week.
Adios.